Guess what? It's time to empty our pockets. Whether you call it ephemera, tchotchkes, gewgaws, or just little bits and pieces, now we get to dump all that stuff out and figure out how to put it to a creative use. In this lesson, I'll show you novel techniques for treating, incorporating, and affixing all of that ephemera, both the man-made stuff and the natural stuff, into your expressive pages. First, I'd like to show you a few examples. Here's a journal I was keeping while on a trip to London, and I picked up some really wonderful business cards and found some decorative paper. One of the issues with the business cards to keep in mind right off the bat is that they're often pretty thick. I'm going to show you how we can work with those. Here I also picked up some natural wild herbs, and I wanted to put them in a journal page, so I'm going to show you how we can use a piece of plastic or even a shower cap to affix things, so things don't just get glued in. With a paper bag journal, we're not quite as concerned because we automatically have these great pockets. So things that are thick are fine in the pockets. Maps that are going to be a little tricky to put into the book are fine because they'll just slide right into your pocket. But it's still fun to attach things on top. And as we said earlier, the more you attach and glue down, the better this journal will feel. So there's not only gluing and attaching things under plastic wrap, but if you like to sew, we're going to talk about machine stitching and hand sewing as well. So let's talk about business cards. Most business cards have multiple plies or layers of paper glued together. It gives it that really stiff feeling. But the problem is if you attach a business card into a journal that has a sewn binding, that journal is going to expand. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So you don't really need all that thickness. So a simple way to treat a business card is to go to the corner, separate the plies, pull gently, and it should separate pretty easily. So now I have the front and the back of the business card, and in my journal I might actually want the information on both sides. So that allows me to attach it to a journal page where I would see both sides. But the other advantage is that this side of the business card is now very rough and it's very porous. So it will accept the glue stick really easily. And you can use both sides of your business card once you have split that in case you want the information on the back as well as the front. Now, I have to tell you, I've split a million business cards, and every now and then, sometimes more often than not, in the splitting, I get the actual image to split. But you know what? I actually like this deckled edge. When it's glued down onto the page, it just gives it a distressed look. Okay, so I've talked about using a glue stick and gluing something in, but I'd like to pause here for just a second and show you a little basic rule with the glue stick. Often my students will say, what brand of glue stick do you use? And I have to tell you, it doesn't really matter. So long as it is not repositionable, any glue stick will work and will hold your paper on whatever you're gluing it to for a long time, so long as you apply it correctly. So watch this. Here's the basic primer. Doesn't matter what brand you use. You're going to set the object you're gluing onto waste paper, something you can throw away or recycle. And the trick is, take your glue stick and run it all the way off every edge, and make sure that your glue is covering every single bit. I'm going to hold this up and look and see if I see that it's shiny everywhere. Now, a lot of glue sticks actually will go on one color, and so that is helpful to see whether it's purple or blue if you've applied the glue stick everywhere. Now that I have glue everywhere, I'm going to take it and place it onto my journal page, put it where I'd like it, and here's the other trick. Use that small brayer we talked about to brayer over the object. If you don't have a brayer, a large soup spoon will work, because the goal is to get rid of any kind of air bubble underneath the object. If there's air underneath that's trapped, that air starts to move out, and that's what causes the paper to pop off. Without any air bubbles, that's going to stay on there for the life of the journal. Let's say you've picked up some wonderful material, but it seems to be too big for your journal page, and yet you want to put it in so you remember that experience. Here's a paper menu that would be way too big for my book. So I'm going to first fold it to make sure that I can attach it and yet still unfold it. Oops, it's hanging over my page. So I can just do a simple accordion fold, bringing that up and this over. Now I can glue the back of that so that I can actually access the menu. I'm going to use that technique, applying my glue on waste paper. I'm going to go to the edges. Then I'll flip this over, set it on the page, and use my brayer or the spoon to press it down to make sure there are no air bubbles trapped underneath. Now I have an accordion fold. I can simply put my paper over that, and when I arrive at that page in my journal, it's just really fun. It's a nice interactive element. The same thing with a map. You might have a full map that you'd like to actually see a section of, and generally maps are going to be way too big. Here's another way you can attach it. After I've figured out the fold, so I'm bringing that up and this over because I'd like to see Colorado and Wyoming. A different way of attaching it into your book is really simple, and that's using any kind of double-sided tape. Now you can get something called scrapbooking tape, which is double-sided. That's going to be quite a bit more expensive than just this permanent double-sided tape, and honestly I haven't seen a real big difference with the quality or performance. So I'm just going to put my double-sided tape on, and that's pretty quick and easy. And my map goes in, and I can open that up and enjoy the area that I wanted to look at. And I can close my book over all of these things, and they're in there for good. Here's another way that you can attach a business card without splitting it, where you will be able to see both sides. Again, I'm using decorative tape, otherwise known as washi tape, and remember that the stick is not that great, so if it does start to lift up off your book, just go ahead and put a little bit of glue stick back on it. I'm just going to cut off a piece of washi tape, apply it to my business card, and then affix it to the page where I might want that business card to become a flap. Just to secure it, I'm going to put another piece of washi tape back behind it and affix that to the page. And now, voila, you have a card that moves back and forth, and it's a nice interactive element. I bet you're wondering why on earth we talked about sandpaper all the way back when we were discussing our materials. Well, I use sandpaper to deal with all the glossy publications that are out there. In particular, maps are often very shiny and on very inexpensive paper. So I'll sand it up just to make it easier to apply the glue and get it stuck into my journal. But there's other ways that you can use sandpaper as well. This is a little bit challenging, but I'm sure you can do it. Go ahead and just crumple up that map. Make sure you press down pretty hard so that the ridges of these folds are going to be pretty strong and sharp. When you open the map up, I'm sanding over the wrinkles, and I'm getting this glossy piece of paper to look very distressed. The other advantage to sanding is that the surface will now be more porous, so it will accept some color. After I've sanded it, it's important to just wipe away all that extra dust. Now I can take my chalk. Here it is, the pigment is on the cotton, and I can add some right onto the sanded surface. Can you see how the ridges that were sanded are now showing up on this glossy surface? It makes it more distressed and I think a little more interesting. Here's a map that was crumpled, sanded, and then some chalk applied, and I'm going to glue that right onto this page. The back of it, as I mentioned, if that's glossy, I want to sand a little bit of that, wipe it clean, and put my glue stick back here. That will make it stick better. The other thing that you often find with a glossy surface is some kind of a flyer or brochure from a museum. And you can use sandpaper to just bring out, and okay, you're altering the picture or the painting or something. In this case, I really love the hands, and I just don't want to put somebody else's full painting into my journal. So I'm taking some sandpaper and I can sand away. So I can alter this image to make it a little more personal. The sanding will distress the image a little bit. So when I put this in my journal, it won't read the painting that I've just glued down. It looks a little bit more personal. Sandpaper can also be used while you're traveling to sharpen a pencil, and any number of other things that you find, kind of like a Boy Scout having some special stuff in your kit. You'll find that sandpaper is great to take with you. One of my favorite things in a journal book is having an interactive element, something that's kind of calling for me to just sort of move around and investigate. Here's a pop-up 3-fold example where this has been glued into the page, and I can open it up to reveal something that I've sketched on there. How would you like to learn how to do that? It's really easy. You have to start with a piece of paper that's thin enough so that you can fold it easily, and it's important that the paper is perfectly square. This is origami paper. It always comes already square, so it's easy to work with, but you can cut out a square of any, even copy paper, just something to practice with so you get used to the actual fold. Now don't worry, there's only 3 folds with this, so I'm not talking about anything like an elaborate origami trick here. I've given you step-by-step details of this in your class materials, so be sure to download them if you haven't already. To create this 3-fold pop-up, you're going to simply fold it in half, in one direction, open that up, then fold it in half again the other direction. I'm matching up the corners just to try to get that pretty close. Again, all I've done now is 2 folds, not intimidating origami. Now I have one last fold to do. I'm going to fold it diagonal, so those corners match up. So it's important to put the side that you want to have on the inside of the pop-up. Hold it so that you've got what's called a mountain fold on the inside. So here you see that ridge that's standing up. We call that a mountain fold. I'm going to set it at the diagonal and put my hand on this top 1/4 of the paper. And this quadrant up here does not have a fold going through it. So I'm going to set my hand on that, push down in the middle, and this mountain fold starts to want to poof up like that. So I'm going to grab those 2 ends, these 2 corners, bring them over to the top of that diagonal, and now all I'm doing is just pressing down, and there you go. Here's my 3-fold pop-up. Ta-da! So if I glue behind this quadrant here, I can affix that to a journal page, and then this will open up as you want it to. This shows where those folds are. So your first fold is taking this paper, the square paper, going in half. Your second fold comes up and over. Your third fold is that diagonal. And again, if you want this part to be the inside, then make sure that this is the mountain right here. Put your finger in the middle, hold down one of the quadrants, and then you can pull this towards you and press it down, and there you go. It's pretty easy. One of the variations with this is to actually stick this corner, that corner there, in a folded area or seam. So I could actually glue this down, or in this case, I'm going to use some decorative tape, just so you could see how this works. I've lined up the corner of my pop-up with the inside fold here. I'm using a file folder just so you can see, but you'll see how this works in a journal in just a second. So I'm just going to tape that in. And if I tape the other side down, magic will happen. So that's taped or glued, or you can use double stick tape. Ta-da! I open it up and there you go. It'll pop open. That works nicely with a journal page even, where you have folded the journal page. Maybe your book has a spiral seam binding, so you don't really have any place to put that corner. So I folded a page. I can put that right in here and attach it. I'll glue both ends so that when I open that up, it'll pop open. Let me show you how it all comes together. This is a travel journal that I had dedicated for a specific trip, and I put the map, that three-fold pop-up, right in the center of my book. That's the little point there. I glued one side and the other side so that when the book closes, it folds in, and voila. You'll notice it's on a map that I sanded, added some distress look to, and then I used rubber stamp over that so it would all kind of tie in. I'm pleased with this page. I hope you have fun playing with it too. Let's say your inclination is to pick up natural objects. Forget the flyers and the business cards. How are we going to get those into a journal page in a satisfying way? Well, I discovered this one day totally by surprise. The hotel we were staying in had a shower cap as an item in the bathroom with all the other toiletries. When I opened it up, I was amazed at how thin the shower cap was. So I had picked up some beautiful wheat just walking in the down some of the little alleyways, and I realized that using some of the plastic wrap from the shower cap or from your kitchen drawer will work just beautifully for attaching these objects into your book. Just be aware that they're not two-dimensional, meaning overly thick. In this case, this is pretty flat, so I can set it down on a page, take my shower cap or plastic wrap, and cut out a section of it, measured to the size of my journal page, and then just get some nice decorative tape. Set the plastic over the object, and then just add the decorative tape to seal it in. You can see on this side, I pulled the object down just slightly so I could get that little stem to come off a little bit away from the box. This works well for anything that's somewhat flat. A feather would go beautifully in there if you didn't want to glue a feather down, which would be kind of icky. So sticking a feather behind the plastic works really nicely as well. So does picking, if you see some natural herbs or some stuff out in the woods that you like that, again, is pretty flat, you can put that underneath the plastic wrap. Here's another way to work with objects that maybe aren't flat at all. You're on the beach, you find some beautiful shells, you already have 5,000 shells in a drawer at home. Why bring home any others? But these shells just were really calling my name. So I can set them on my journal page, and I'm going to just use my pencil and simply trace around the shell. In this case, I'm going to use the two shells because I really like the shape of this long one. And I can trace around that and then go over those tracings and fill them in with color at a later date, or they're sitting enjoying the beach. When I'm all done creating this page, I just love the shell one more time and leave it in the sand for somebody else to take home. Also, you can put any of these natural objects on your page and go back to that spraying technique we talked about in an earlier lesson. Use either your red wine or your coffee. You can spray over that object and leave the object behind and let your page dry, and there you've got the memory, you've captured the moment in your expressive pages. Let's say your adventure for today is just going into your own beautiful garden. Find a leaf that just has a nice shape, and you can do this really simple technique just to put the day's experience down on one of your pages. You're going to take the leaf. It does help if the leaf is fresh. This doesn't work so well with crunchy, dried, fallen leaves that have come down in the fall. So you've got a fresh leaf. You create a puddle of watercolor and simply set the leaf down and paint that leaf with your watercolor. My friends in Crested Butte, Colorado showed me this technique, and what we discovered is the first couple of times you paint it, the paint seems to bead up quite a bit. But I'm going to take that leaf, flip it over on my page. It's helpful to have some paper towel handy, and I just press it down with the paper towel. The more that I do this, and of course I can change color or add color, the more that I do this, for some reason, that paint seems to stick a little bit better on the leaf. It's as if there was some kind of a waxy coating that gets sort of wiped off or broken through. So I'm turning the leaf over, setting it on my page, and pressing down. I can go over these shapes with my pen to just highlight or define those areas a little bit more. I can even add to that. And now I have what I think is a very pleasing shape. I like the irregularity, and I love the feeling of that print. If I compare that one with this leaf shape, I really like the two. I like the contrast of the open space here and more of the paint color there. You can play with these leaf shapes to create a border or a section of a journal page. Now that you've got some beautiful areas for that background writing or your text bands, it's just a great beginning to make that page really expressive. Here's another way that you can enjoy a little time in your garden and use it for inspiration to fill your pages. This is called petal rubbing. You need some fresh, juicy petals. Some flowers are going to work better than others, so you do have to experiment just a little bit. Set the fresh petals down on your journal page. So I've got some purples and I'm not sure what color that is, kind of a reddish color, and I'm going to set another page right on top, pressing the flowers down. Now I take a spoon and I'm going to rub vigorously, pressing the petal so that all of the moisture is coming out of the petal, and I can start to see it come up on my page just a little bit. That little bit of moisture is telling me that I've rubbed vigorously enough to really squish the petal. Now I have to find those little purple guys I was working with. There we are. And now let's see if any magic happened. I flip the page over. Oh, look at that. And I'll remove the squish petal. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Oh, look how the color is transferred. And here, just like I did in the previous demo with the painted leaves, I can take my pen and just help define that shape a little bit more. I'm going to leave that bottom part sort of fuzzy. And boy, to me that really pops off the page. I love the magic that happens. It's not something you can control. So for this process, you really have to kind of let go and let the magic happen, or not. And again, like I said, you do have to experiment to see which flowers are going to work best. It will not work if you find petals that have been on the ground for a long time because the petals aren't juicy enough. So give it a try. In this lesson, we've gone through different ways to use all the ephemera and things you've picked up, both man-made objects and natural objects. I want to really encourage you to use them in your journal, activate your pages, get some satisfaction down, anchor the moment, all of that good stuff, and then consider recycling the stuff you picked up or putting the shells back on the beach. I have found for myself that if I don't get it in a book at some point within a few weeks, it starts to lose some of that energy and meaning for me. So also I have found drawers and drawers full of this stuff that I've collected over the last few years. So I do really encourage you to get it in your book, and what doesn't make it gets lovingly tossed out. In the next lesson, we'll approach sketching with some simple techniques that are a wonderful way to anchor and record your experience.